Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Bobble Pod. On this episode, I will be actually giving feedback based on a response from a couple of our listeners that requested, which was, what do you do when your Google ad account gets suspended? So today's topic is, has your Google ad account been suspended, and what you can do to reverse that decision or what processes you need to follow. But before we begin, as always, I want to say, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other streaming platform. If you're on YouTube, hi YouTube. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button, bell notification to get notifications of all the episodes that come out every Tuesday. So, has your Google ad account been restricted? This is a key problem that I would say we occur a lot of. It's not something that's highly frequently, but since Google made a lot of changes to their team, to their resources, around 10 to 15,000 resources in terms of employees, Google has cut back on in the last 12 months. We are seeing more and more companies, you know, if you type in PPC agency leads, we're number one. We get a lot of I say a lot. We get a handful of inquiries probably in the last 6 months that have been around, I've got issues with my Google ad account. My ad account's been restricted, suspended. It's coming up with policy violations, etc., etc. And it seems to be becoming a more of a repetitive theme. Also, when we were reviewing the feedback from our listeners or subscribers, it seemed to be a topic that got mentioned more than a couple of times in terms of like, well, saw your podcast about Performance Max campaign, but you know, I can't run anything right now because my ad account's suspended. What should I do? So on this podcast, we aim to answer all those questions. And we're going to talk about, first of all, why do accounts get suspended? So if your Google ad account has that message saying, your ad account has been suspended, please contact or request a review, almost like a red notification that comes on top of the ad account. You should normally get an email to your Gmail about it. It's because Google has found a violation of one of its policies. Now, Google has thousands of policies that you might not be aware of, that you might be aware of. We tend to see it more in e-commerce or more specific medical or financial sectors where policies might get implemented. So what Google does is uses a combination of automated systems, some manual reviews when detecting violations, and if it finds that, there is a violation to one of its policies, it will suspend your accounts. So how are the accounts suspended? So depending on the violation, accounts get suspended either immediately or upon detection of violation. Google will give a warning of like up to 7 days of, an account suspension is going to take place. So when that happens and when the account is suspended, two things happen. Your ads will not run and you won't be able to create any new content such as ads, ad groups, campaigns, update keywords, etc. You can still access the historical data in the ad account. It's not like you can't log into Google, but you can still go in. And in some instances, I've made a note here that accounts related or linked to a suspended account may also be suspended, such as their linked merchant center accounts. So that's more important when you're doing e-commerce or Google shopping campaigns. So bear that in mind. So everything will just stop working. And you're like, ads aren't running, nothing will get spent. And you're thinking, why has this happened to me? And it's because of a policy violation. So the next question comes to, well, what are the different types of account suspensions? So the first one is a policy violation. So this occurs, and we'll add a link to the YouTube of the Google Ads policy and their terms and conditions. I'll make sure that's added in the actual description in the YouTube in terms of what they are, so you have a direct link to it. But in terms of policy violations, the common ones include inappropriate or restricted content, issues related to editorial requirements, or misuse of data. They're the three key things. And you might think, what is that? What is inappropriate restricted content? So like, inappropriate could be use of language in ads, or it could be inappropriate keywords or videos or images that you might be pushing as part of your text ads, or, expansion ad in terms of your image extensions to your ad, should I say. Editorial requirements, could be anything from, the type of content you're relating it to on your website, doesn't follow key policies of Google. Essentially, you want to keep it clean. It's as simple as that. You don't want to tether the lines with anything. And if you're misusing any kind of data or misrepresenting things as well, there's also certain keywords you can't bid on as well within Google. We have one of our clients, I've mentioned this a few times, is the aesthetics doctor. Now, aesthetics, everything to do with like lip filling, lanluma, non-surgical rhinoplasties. Now, these are very key medical terms, and there's clear policies around medical terms that you can bid and what you can show, including the content that goes on landing page. Bear in mind that it's not always what's in the ad account. It can be what's off the ad account as well. So it's the content on the landing page. So if we're talking about, a medical term for a client, but then the page content talks about loads of other random things that we're not supposed to be talking about, then yes, Google will look at where that experience, the full landing page experience, as part of the Google Ads accounts. Then you've got another one, which is called egregious violations. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Egregious, egregious violations. Am I right there, Callum?
I would say yes. Yes.
Callum is our, obviously, dictionary and helps us when we need. Thanks for the jump in. These are suspensions where Google Ads deems unlawful or harmful content or violations. Typically reflect overall practices of a business, not necessarily the campaigns on the account, as I mentioned earlier. So it's not generally, what you're doing in the ad account, it's what you're doing outside as a business. It's unlikely that a suspension in this case, when it's egregious, a violation will be overturned and will probably be permanent. So bear in mind that if your suspension doesn't get overturned, it's permanent. You're done. You can then create a new ad account, but if it's assigned to the same payment profile, same company details and registered company information, it will, pick it up at some point. Common egregious violations include circumventing systems, unacceptable business practices, malicious software, and counterfeiting. So what we find in this element is circumventing systems is a common egregious violation. So that's where you're basically driving people to like a dead ad or something that's not really what you're promoting it out to be. You've got to be really careful. It happens a lot with what I call B2C e-commerce based clients and companies, especially when there's some kind of, counterfeiting or something malicious kind of going on and what they're saying they're doing and what they're actually driving to do. So beware because Google looks at that. There's also other types of suspensions. So other reasons why an account may be temporarily suspended could be suspicious payment activity, unpaid balance, or unauthorized account activity. And they tend to be, I'd say, more the common ones. Outside policy violation is where, a card and account has been flagged, let's say, then Google will know. So you want to make sure your payments, if your payment isn't paid and let's say your card, and this is what happens, the card payment on the ad account expires and they can't take the payment, so they suspend the account temporarily, and until you update the payment information, and it comes up as a red banner on top of Google Ads, you then have to, update it, make the payment of outstanding balance, and that is unauthorized account activities when it suspects suspicious activity where you've linked your ad account to something that you shouldn't have linked it to, or you're doing things on it that it shouldn't be. That can be classed as another suspension as well. So they're what happens when you can't get suspended, the different types of suspension. But what do you do if your account is suspended? So if it's a policy violation, so basically your account's been suspended for policy or terms and conditions, you have to resolve the issue by submitting an appeal. Now, Google Ads Help guideline platform details information about this. If you do not submit appeal until you've made the relevant changes, you can do that. So if it's an issue where it's a policy violation, you have to change something. Like I said, very rare that it suspends your account straight away. It gives you a notification. Use those 7 days to make the changes. If you're aware of what the policy violation is, then you can then submit it saying, this is the issue, fix the issue, submitted it, you can appeal. For example, if you've been suspended for violating editorial requirements, review your ad copy to check for potential issues regarding capitalization, spacing, spelling, or symbols, or stuff like that, whatever it is, and then submit your review. And then it goes into an automated or manual review, depending on how Google views it. And then what you tend to see is that that's overturned and things go back to normal. But then learn from the situation. Learn what you can, learn what you can't do, what you can post, what you can't post. When it comes to egregious violations, as we discussed earlier, these are treated very, very, very seriously. In most cases, the suspension is very, very permanent. However, if you genuinely believe that the suspension is baseless, you can submit an appeal. Again, make relevant changes to your account and or business practices before you submit your appeal, because it's important, because you only get one chance to submit an appeal when it's egregious violation, and that's it. So before you just submit it saying, oh no, we're in the right, make sure you are actually in the right. Make sure it's not, take the time to review your business practices. Honestly, make sure you've done all you can to comply. Then and only then submit your appeal. Get outside advice, reach out to agencies, speak to Google first before you put appeal in, saying, what could this be on? Read the Google Ads helpline guides. Obviously, the links will be in the description on YouTube, a video. That's very, very, very important. So in other suspensions where we talked about elements like, serious payment activity, unpaid balance, in many of these cases, billing issues caused by suspensions, so just basically check the billing section of your account, ensure it's all accurate, make sure your payment method is up to date, make sure recent payments have not been declined by your bank for whatever reason. Most people have their credit card, and on some occasions your credit card can get suspended for suspicious activity. You might not know that, but that has a knock-on effect to everything else that's linked to that bank account. You've got 30 days to kind of fix things with billings and payment issues. Beyond that, it can lead to a permanent suspension, or your ad account can get flagged. So if you have an unpaid balance, don't leave it longer than 30 days to resolve. That's when an issue becomes bigger, because then you then owe money to Google, and Google's not a small company. It's a large organization, and they will collect in some form or another, especially if it's a high amount. You may be also required, and you might see this happening recently, your advertiser verification program to confirm your identity or business operations. This is something that's happened a lot recently. You get a lot of emails will be going on to clients' Gmails. They get forwarded on to us, and we just go back and say, just complete the form. Click on the link, complete the form, confirm your identity, confirm your business operations identity, and that's all Google wants to do. Google started rolling this out over a year ago, probably first half of 2022. These things still happen and still updated. So that's another reason in terms of what you can do. If your account's been suspended, check that it's not because you haven't failed to update your, advertiser verification information. Okay, so if you've had something, let's say, classed as unauthorized account activity, that means Google's detected suspicious activity, your account could get suspended, and that's to protect you. What you need to do is, if you feel like there's been suspicious activity on your social media or your emails, change your Google account password immediately, check for any kind of unfamiliar device assigned to your account, submit a compromised account form, which you can do through Google, and I'll give you the link for that as well. So next steps, what happens? So we know why do your accounts get suspended, how they are suspended, the different types of suspensions, from policy violations, egregious violations, what you should do in those systems. The next steps is really appeal. If you appeal, it's accepted, your account basically gets reinstated. So you can resume running campaigns and Google Ads and stuff. Beware of violating the same policy in the future, and make sure, because you can get infringed on if you and get permanently suspended if you repeat the same violations again and again and again, because then to Google's mind, you're just not learning. If your appeal is denied, you may be eligible to submit another appeal, but you must make the relevant changes before you do so. Unfortunately, Google's not going to give you the full details. It'll just say this is a violation, and then it's up to you to work out how your ads or keywords or whatever you're doing on your paid content is conflicting with that particular policy violation. If they give you that, while there's no real limit of number of appeals you can make, too many appeals have been made, they may not be processed. So if you're making constant appeals in that element, you won't. For egregious violations, if your appeal is denied and you are permanently suspended, you have been banned from using Google Ads. So that's why it's very, very serious. Creating a new account will also result in suspensions, as I mentioned earlier. If you still have funds in your account, you need to cancel your account to receive a refund, but that's more reflected to old ad account setups. So it's really hard then, really. So your next steps is really appeal. You're either accepted or denied. If it's for a policy violation or other suspensions, normally it's reinstated once you update your billing, or you fix the problem, submit appeal, it's resolved. Don't make the same mistakes again, because again, long-term impact of making the same mistakes, same policy violations leads to permanent suspension as well. That's something you want to avoid. That's where we can't help. So if you're thinking, yeah, my account's been suspended, or we've had this issue, or you've already had a few policy violations, the same one again and again, then seek advice. Understand best practice, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing with the Google Ads implementation, optimizations, and strategy. To try and make sense of Google Ads accounts, remember they're designed to help keep advertisers, what they say as, and users safe. They're there to stop any kind of malicious, dangerous activity on the platform. It's all about, Google cares about its experience. Remember, over 90% of the world population use Google as its search engine tool, that do use or have access to internet or use a search engine. So for them, it's all about making sure they're improving the Google Ads experience, and none of these issues are coming up. That's something you have to consider. So remember, you always have the right to appeal. If it's denied, it becomes a lot more difficult, but make sure you're following all the relevant checklists. If you're not sure, have a look at or listen to some of our previous Bobble Pod episodes where we've talked about, Google best practices, performance max campaigns. That's what you need to do. Very simple and straight one. I hope that has answered some of the questions and queries raised by our audience. I think that was a great topic and a great element to raise with us, because, you're not really going to find this in kind of like a podcast or a video explanation in that kind of format. So if you have any more kind of like questions about that, what do I do or what happens with this, then please use the hashtag AskBobble, hashtag Mr. Bobble, hashtag BobblePod. We do check all our, social activity. Drop an email, reach out to us directly, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Manpreet Singh is my profile. You can't miss it. Ask these questions, because then we can give you better value to the podcast in terms of information, educational content, so you can get better understanding of what to do, what the processes are. There'll be some links into the video as I highlighted earlier to do that. As before I wrap up, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. Thank you for listening. Next topic we have, we'll be talking about brand merchandise with James Biggin, MD, talking about how you can take your basically offline brand merchandise, mix that with digital marketing. So that's one to listen to. And thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Cheers.